award-winning agencies. She's a regular panellist on the ABC's highly popular Gruen program and often features in a variety of television shows, including Sunrise on Channel 7, The Today Show on Channel 9, discussing advertising naturally. Caroline's the founding director of communication consultancy, The Honeycomb Group. And Carolyn loves seeing brands and businesses succeed. She's passionate about bringing ideas to life. Her background as a strategist not only gives her great insight into the brand advertising world, but also the heartland of consumer sentiment and cultural trends. Please join me welcoming Carolyn Miller.
Hi everyone, thank you Neil. That's really appreciated. I've realised I was too tall for the camera as well when I was walking in, so that's always fun. I just want to say thank you so much for having me here in the offices and for tuning in wherever you are around the country. I've obviously been working with Neil previously, and I'm really excited about the opportunities of having a new bureau that I can work with and kind of have more potential of the sort of clients that we can reach. And just to give you some framing about my presentation today, I have written it in a way that I'm talking about myself in the third person, which when you're presenting it feels very weird. But the reason why I've done it like that is I really want this presentation to be a tool that you guys can use and send out to your clients as needed. This is definitely something that I'm happy to go out into the wider world, which is why I presented myself like I'm not there. So if it does feel a bit bizarre, that would be why, but I also want you to have context. And the other thing about that presentation then is that it is a lot of content, so it's about 42 slides. We're not going to get through that in 20 minutes, so I'm going to kind of present my key presentation, or a couple of slides from my key presentation on branding, and then just quickly jump over some of the key takeaways from some of my other core topics, rather than going through and presenting the whole lot. So just to give you some context, but please also, any questions, let me know. I'm always happy to tailor.
Perfect.
Excellent.
Okay, so shall we start?
Bye. My presentation.
Sure.
Yay, excellent. Okay.
Sorry, just got to swap it back. Give me 1 second, display setting.
Got a lot of technology, don't you?
I know.
It's going well.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you.
No, thanks.
It's one of the more seamless technology experiences I've had. It's great. So just to let you know, this page, the Introducing Carolyn Miller, this is what my website is going to look like. So at the moment, I do have a website, which is The Honeycomb Effect, but it's more about my consultancy than me personally. And this is going to go live in April. So the kind of the colours and things that you see, that's all going to happen. So who am I? First and foremost, at the very crux of what I stand for, I'm a communications expert. So communication is essentially super critical for anything, whether it's your relationships, whether it's for businesses, whether it's for society. If we don't have strong and easily understood communication, we have real problems. So it doesn't matter, the best ideas will fail if they're not communicated well. So when I kind of think of myself, I think of myself first and foremost as a communications expert. So obviously advertising and marketing is the basis of that. But it's also come through in writing that I've done and being published in different works. So there is a lot of communication work that I've done beyond advertising as well. Communication is key. So how do you know me? Here's some lovely screen grabs, and that one down the bottom right is a shocker, but that was the best I could do out of it. Anywho, that's okay. You'll see me from TV appearances. I've had more than 20 episodes credited on Gruen. I've been one of the most consistent panelists since 2009, so which has been very, very positive for me. I also get regular callbacks for the Today Show, so I talk about different topics there, all about communication though, whether it's political advertising. Oh,
Sorry.
that's all right. There we go. Well, Super Bowl ads, talk about the Americans and Australian advertising, and then also even about products and things like that, which is what I've done for Sunrise and for ABC News 24, talking about Qantas and their issues, or whether ginger nut biscuits have changed their recipe, you know, the hot topics of the day. Important stuff.
Yeah.
So what makes me an expert though? I did study communications at uni for a start, so that was, you know, many, many years ago. But I've been in the communications field for over 20 years, and I've had a really strong measure of success during that time. So obviously I run my own consultancy now, which I've been running for quite a few years, and that's been going very well. But I've also been a senior executive at Nespresso. So Nespresso, yeah, is a premium brand. I worked there for 6 years. Thank you. We've got a live one in the room, which is always a good brand endorsement. So I was head of Virtuo by the time I left Nespresso. So that was a very positive role. I've also been a member of the board at Family Planning New South Wales. I was a member of the board there for 6 years, which is very much about social justice, women's issues, and I was actually promoted to vice president during my tenure there as well. So that was quite good. I did leave there as it was a volunteer board, and I'm currently looking out now for paid board roles. So fingers crossed I'll be able to have an update on that over the next 6 months or something coming in. Clearly, my background is in advertising, so I spent well over 10 years in the really big agencies like DDB and Havas. So I've got a good credential list of advertising credits. I've been published, as I mentioned before, as a writer, a contributor and a reviewer, and I've got an MBA. So I've got lots of stuff backing, if you like, rather than just being on a talking head on telly, which is good. In terms of my speaking credentials particularly, and I think that this is, as a communications expert, the most important thing for me, is that my best skill and the thing that I'm most proud of in my expertise is actually as a speaker. So first and foremost, my best communication expertise is speaking. So if you want a solid professional who is a speaker through and through, then that is exactly what you're going to get with me. And with that, and again, it's very strange being Australian to talk about yourself in these kind of big noting terms, so much easier to read rather than say. But I am articulate, I am charming, I'm quick-witted. I'm actually very good. I've done MC duties before where we had to think on the fly, and I had to create interviews out of nothing in order to fill spaces when a speaker is pulled out. So, you know, I'm very able to work on the fly with people and actually conduct interviews or do things to fill space. So that's always good. I'm flexible, I'm creative, obviously, and lots of stylized presentations, communications, marketing, telly. Personable as well, so I'm more than happy to go to social events and actually speak to attendees afterwards, and that's something that I know clients always appreciate, to be able to have the contact with. I'm not pretentious in any way, as you may be able to tell from our experiences, and I've done this for over 10 years. So this isn't a new gig for me. This is something that I've been represented by Saxons during that time. As Saxons consultants have left, I've kind of joined onto their little bandwagons as well. So, you know, that as this stuff happens. And that's why I'm really excited to be joining another major player to be able to be represented by you guys. So, talking about my speaking topics, and I can adapt these. It's not like I have set presentations that's all I do. I'm more than happy to work with organisers to make sure it's relevant. So number one, and what I get booked for the most, is about branding. And branding is not the cow thing there where you burn the flesh with a star. That's probably not my area of expertise, but it's more about what brands are in marketing. So what is a brand? And we all kind of think that we know brands. And we kind of think, well, I know the brand Coke, or I know the brand Apple, and I know what that means. But actually, when you start looking at it from a marketing professional point of view, there's a lot of different things that happen with a brand. And certainly the brand is not this idea that it's a logo. And in fact, a brand is made up of so many more things than just what you visually see. So it is the customer experience. It is how the product delivers. It is the environment that it's launched into, or the environment that it exists in. So who's the competition? How do people choose between you and other products? That actually affects your brand. It's your price. It's your design. It's so many different facets. But it's almost like saying it's the personality of something that's a product. So when we think of human beings, if you like, our brand is what we bring. It's how we look, it's how people respond to us, and it's the personality that we actually bring in. So that's how, when we talk about that we love brands or we love people, it's those things that are emotive rather than necessarily something that is very black and white. Well, I like it because it's big. Not necessarily. That's not the case. Yeah. Now, this is a charming little thing, but I think does represent my style as a speaker. This is by a company called HUEL, which is an acronym, which is a joining of human and fuel. They do something which essentially is, from what I can tell, is basically a food replacement product drink. But their idea behind this is don't be a dick is the biggest thing they have there when you walk into their office. And I think that is on their reception in their office. So that's some interesting brand cues to come through. Yeah. And it does, you know, these ideas of what do we stand for, and this is kind of reinforcing to everyone when they come to work every day, is that, you know, be nice. There's a really important part of it. they have their mission statement underneath it, but the brand is more than just the mission as well. It's these things working together that actually create this feeling about what that company does and what that brand actually stands for. They all contribute to it. So the brand is definitely not a product. A product can be copied. So once your patent expires, you can get your generic knockoff the moment that happens. So there's no value in that. So that's why brands actually do have a dollar value put on them. And if you ever have looked into companies being bought or sold, you will actually see that there's brand equity built into the price of the company. That's because the brand itself has value. So things that are tangible about the product. So like for instance, Coca-Cola is a brown drink, and that's fine. That's not what their brand is. You know, their brand has nothing to do with being a brown drink. But interestingly, their Coca-Cola bottle shape is very intrinsic to their brand. So there are kind of characteristics of the product that make up the brand, but it's not the brand in its entirety. So how can I explain that a little bit further? It's not just a product characteristic. So Coca-Cola, they make fizzy drinks for sure, and they advertise refreshment for sure. But what they sell as their brand is happiness. So if you ever look at Coke ads, they're selling that when you drink Coke, you will be a happier person. So how they're getting away with that, I'm not entirely sure, because legally it's probably not. But they have that even on the opening of their cans. It's open happiness. Like that is something that they're really selling to say, if you want to be a happy person, you can drink Coke. The fact that they're not particularly doing well anymore might be the example that people aren't necessarily willing to take on things like that. But it just kind of goes to show how the brand doesn't just sell, well, we're a refreshing drink. They sell something bigger than that. And likewise with Harley Davidson, sure they sell motorbikes, sure they're a lifestyle brand, but the number one buyer of Harley Davidsons are guys in their 50s. So, and the reason for that, the reason for that is because what Harley Davidson stands for is the open road. It's freedom. They stand for this idea of letting all your worries go and being completely free, and that is the ideology of who wants that are guys in their 50s. Like that is absolutely who that stands for. So whilst you might have Easy Rider as being the movie that kind of speaks to it, that's where the real appeal comes through, is that emotional thing of I feel free when I'm on this. And different, like technically speaking, could it feel any different to any other motorbike?
No.
I don't know. But that's what you feel. I can see the Puritans in the room who know bikes, but that's what they're selling. They're selling the freedom. So that's really where a brand comes down to. It's a connection to our gut feeling. And it doesn't have to be rational. Like people can try and post-rationalize their choices around things, but in many cases, what people look for in brands is, well, that's for someone like me. And conversely, they'll reject brands when they say that's not for someone like me. And you can really see that. You can really see when people go, that looks too premium for me. And I remember an episode of The Simpsons where Marge Simpson was kind of thinking about shopping somewhere that Lisa wanted to go to. And she said to her, she goes, oh, I'm not sure we can shop somewhere that has a philosophy. So, and that was the idea. It's like these products that have kind of elevated themselves for The Simpsons. They're like, oh, that's too fancy pants. That's not something that we want to do. So, there is an intrinsic thing that branding does to make people feel like when I purchase this or when I use this company or when I use these services, this is the right fit for me. And it's about creating that jigsaw fit, which makes it really strong. So as I said, the brand choices aren't rational. And there are many, many people who go, well, I only ever make decisions that are rational. I don't get swayed by marketing. And there's a lot of people who genuinely think that. And I'm not trying to convince anyone in the room that that's not the case necessarily. But I remember going and speaking at a beef conference, so beef farmers, talking to them about branding, right? It was good times, but they are very smart men. Like these are all smart people with money, all the rest of it, but they don't believe in marketing hype. So I was kind of on the back foot a little bit from there. So one of the ways that I framed it when I came in to talk to them about branding was, if you think that you're not swayed by marketing material, and if you think that brands don't matter, I said, I drove into this car park. It was held in Armidale at the university there. And every single car there was a white Toyota Hilux. Like 95%, let's say, because there might have been a couple of outliers, but for the most part, all of the cars were identical. I looked into the crowd, every single person wearing check shirts, jeans, R.M. Williams boots. And I said, if you don't believe that branding is something that's a part of your life, why are you all the same? And there was a thing was I took it with very good humor. Like I did frame it in a way that, but this is the thing, you join this is the brands that feel right for you. They're in your world. These are the things that represent farmers, success in farming, all of these things. These are the brand values that these products have attained for you. And that's why you all have them. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think this is the most important point to note. You haven't been duped. This is not something clever where you've been swindled. It is a way of identifying your tribe. It's totally fine and it's very acceptable. So it's good. This comes down to intuitive versus rational thinking. So this is studied. This is not something that I've just thought up. It is definitely something that truly exists. 95% of our decisions are done with system one thinking, which is essentially fast stuff where we just go, that's right, we don't think about it. So when we actually stop and think about real decisions, so the 5% of decisions that we make are slow, considered and rationally driven. That's not what we're using in the supermarket. That's certainly not what we're looking at when we're going and buying clothes or things like that. It is most of our decisions we shortcut. That's how we're hardwired as humans to do it. And that's why the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world and the Barack Obamas had the same clothes they wore every day, was to take that decision making out of their daily ritual that they had to do. They knew what they were wearing. They never had to make a decision on it. Shortcutting decisions is naturally what we're inclined to do. And brands make it easy for us to shortcut a decision. So when we have a good experience with a brand, or if we have a good experience with a company, it's easy to shortcut it going, I've done that, it's trusted, I believe in them. I have an emotional thing. That's not rational thinking. You're like, it's not someone going, well, they're cheaper than doing the spreadsheet on it. It's just someone going, I feel good about doing this. So you just don't have to think about it. And that's a really important part of brands. So how we define ourselves as a brand guides all of our behaviour. And I've put this lovely photo of a woman running in the rain, which is very appropriate for our Melbourne weather today. Because basically, if you think of yourself as someone who runs, the second there's an obstacle, you don't go running. If you think of yourself as a runner, nothing will stop you running. And this is this idea of how you define what your brand is. Versus if you're just someone who runs every now and then, like the second it rains or the second that time starts to get away in a bit, the fact that you run every now and then means that I'm not going to go for a run this morning then. But if you think of yourself as an athlete and a runner first, you will work around everything else so that you get your run in that morning. And I just think when you think about framing and you think about what your brand actually stands for, those things are really important because it will impact how your behavior actually goes through your company or through your products. So it's a very interesting way to look at it. So that's just a snapshot out of my branding presentation. These are the key takeaways that clients would get out of it. The brand is not just a responsibility of the marketing team. So even though everyone looks and goes, that's a marketer's job, it's not. It's everyone on the front desk, customer facing, on the phones, anyone who's in part of that company is living that brand. You have an impact on it. So it's a responsibility, and it's something whereby you need to present the way that the brand needs to present. And the brand has value in real monetary terms. I talked about that, of brand equity actually being something that you put dollar value on. And funnily enough, Donald Trump, of all people, apparently his $1 billion wealth, a very large part of that is his brand valuation by his own account. So usually it's other people who decide that for you when you're a Trump.
I'm a billionaire.
Yeah, exactly. Call yourself a billionaire. It's fine. Your brand's worth something. Unfortunately for him, your brand is not defined by you. It's defined by your customers at the end of the day. So you can say it, but if it doesn't deliver, then your customers are the ones who call you out. So it has to deliver on what you actually say it is. It's not just your product, and it is unique to you. So your brand is ownable to you. It is something that can't be stolen. It lives in your product experience though, and it also clearly lives in your advertising and any communications marketing work that you do. And your brand is experienced through your people. So your employees are your first recipients of your brand values, if you like. So I always like the idea of treating your employees like your first customers. And I think that if that's done correctly, then your customers will have that experience as well. So that's topic one. As I said, I'm not going to go through these others in such detail because I don't feel that we have the time for it. I don't want to waste anyone's time. But creativity and innovation is, again, this presentation is something that I've done a lot. And we've got the old Don Draper from Mad Men here. And this is actually quite a good one for clients who are a bit more maths and science oriented, because a lot of these people go, well, I'm not getting into creative stuff, that's not for me. And also finance. Finance seem to like this as well. So it's for people who who don't think that creative is something that their business is in. And this is really talking about that actually creativity is a business tool and it can actually improve. And to be fair, a hell of a lot of mathematicians and scientists and physicists and all of these people are creative because they have to imagine things that don't exist. So the creativity actually already really exists in these occupations, and it's just a matter of how do you make it flow and feel a lot more natural, if you like, in the workplace. So basically, I've got some lovely quotes in here. Kessler was a fantastic writer who broke out of Hungary during the Soviet Union. But it's this idea about framing perspective and being able to look at things from a new point of view. And I think that's something that, again, because we're lazy in the way that we think, we only just assume one way and we never challenge ourselves to look at things in other ways. So it's about looking at that. A few other quotes on it. One of the reasons why I put the Nike prosthetic leg in here is because I think one of the greatest things about creativity and thinking of creativity and innovation is when they first created fake legs, they just, there were these wooden things that were painted a weird skin color to kind of look like a real leg. And then they went, well, what if we looked at function rather than what it looked like? If you stopped thinking that everyone's main motivation was not to be embarrassed, and now you have triathletes who are complaining that people with false limbs have actually got an advantage. Like it's it's amazing. And then I love this as well. They moved on to the dress version, so you can actually bling it up. Yeah, yeah. It's about thinking differently and reframing what you believe prosthetics should be about. I think it's fantastic. And I go through a whole load of different techniques, how you can do it in your office. This has been done repeatedly as workshops as well. And it's about how you frame the problem that you've got to solve, how you challenge it from new approaches, got some interactive techniques, it's all good. And so these are the takeaways from it. First of all, anyone can think creatively. There's no such thing as a person who's not creative. You problem solve all the time, so you are already a creative person. It's just learning how to flex the muscle and having some tools to help you do so. Rules and techniques, I'll talk about that. Group participation to open creative pathways. I think one of the biggest things out of this is that creativity is very hard to have in a bubble. Like you do need to have people to bounce things around, and I think that's really important. You're already thinking creatively. It's not a nice to have. Creative thinking is actually a business tool. You should think of it in the same way you think of people learning how to use Excel is important. Being able to think creatively is important. It takes regular practice though to get really good at it, and workshopping tools as well. And another one, so this, again, I'm going to jump through this quite quickly. So this is my newest one that I've been thinking about, is this idea of does truth matter in a world of fake news? And this is really very much about, we're in a new realm at the moment, and communication for me has never been more important, because we have this thing at the moment whereby we only ever see opinions that reinforce our opinion. And I think that is a lot of the time quite terrifying, because it's very easy to switch off either people or articles or anything that disagrees with you. Our natural instinct is to go, I don't like this because it challenges me, so I switch it off. So whether I unfollow someone on Facebook or whether I just don't read the rest of the article, we tend not to challenge ourselves to see other types of opinion. So what that also leads to then is that we keep getting the same information coming through, and no one's challenging when things are completely fake. So social media has clearly just created a whole new ball game with a whole, bunch of, and not to be racist, but Russians, being able to input just crazy stuff that if people want to believe it, they'll share themselves. And the second that you start getting information from someone that you know and trust, it becomes more plausible. So this is why truth, it really is important. So I bang on about digital a bit, talking about our digital experience, the fact that we're being tailed by the same messages all the time, our digital data and what that means. But trust is still absolutely fundamentally important. This would actually be a video as well about deepfake. I don't know whether or not you've seen this before, but deepfake is now fake video. And you can get any celebrity, any famous person to say whatever you want. Wow. It is absolutely phenomenal. So it is actually a video, and I'll be more than happy to show it, but it is absolutely phenomenal what they can do. So even this idea that if it's someone speaking, well, I can trust that that's them saying it, it's not. So not necessarily anymore. It's completely shifted. The fact that also we're not even paying attention to one thing at a time, we're doing a whole load of different stuff. And this is an example with social media, because that is definitely the biggest problem area for us, is this woman. She's an influencer. She's got 200 and something followers, I think, 250,000 followers, something like that. And she legitimately did have a bike accident. But then she staged photographs of it later, which is clearly not the accident that she was in. And I just love at one point there was then branded bottles of water that went into the photo. So it turned into a sponsored post. And that is bonkers. Like, number one, as an influencer, that is a poor way to approach how you would actually run social media. But people are calling it out now. And I mean, the people are starting to see also behind the camera. So I was like, wow, it's amazing that you happen to have a model there and someone taking a photo right at that moment with your bike standing up in the background. You know, like it's clearly not, but she was trying to palm it off as being a genuine accident shot. And there's a lot of different reference material from big influencers, which is also why brands need to be careful about influencers too, because there are a lot of people who do virtually anything to get views and clicks, and they're making money out of it. So, you know, it's hard to stop that, but it does make truth more important. And the truth actually works. This is a real,
That's gorgeous.
Yeah, the truth works. We need to work towards perpetuating a culture that values it. And I think that truth is stranger than fiction. You don't need to fake stuff to be interesting. It is something that we should challenge ourselves as marketers and as communicators to make sure that we do push the truth and we challenge those who don't. So I think that there's a personal responsibility that we need to look at and make self-judgments over whether truth is actually used in the wording that we're seeing. So these key takeaways, our views are always being reinforced. Importance of truth in individuals and companies. Being perfect doesn't need to be an aspiration anymore. In fact, there's a real genuine thing towards real people. And I think that even some models and things are now posting photos of themselves pulling faces and looking a bit gross, because that's authentic, and authenticity is actually now more important in many ways than being perfect. Exactly. That's exactly it. There's a real following for that. Even genuine news outlets get filled by fake news. So, and in fact, I have an example of this as well, which I can take you through, but this was back in the days before social media got off. So this even was before the world that we're in now. This was back in 2008. And there was a brand called Mark Echo in the States. And basically what they did is they hired a plane and they repainted it to look like Air Force One. And they actually had what looks like a guerrilla video of some kids coming in and actually graffitiing the plane, so tagging it with the Mark Echo logo. And they didn't realize, the news outlets didn't realize this was fake. So they spent basically $800,000 on the production of this video because of the plane and hiring and painting it and everything else. And they got so much free coverage through the press before the company actually came out and said, no, this is a fake. But the news outlets absolutely bought into it, and the brand itself, Mark Echo, is a guerrilla street brand. So it absolutely fitted their ethos of we're sticking it to the man, and people and you know, it outraged the middle class old people, and you know, everything really worked for it. So a lot of clever stuff that came through with that.
That's clever.
That's good. That's clever. So this is a summary of some other things that I haven't tapped into. It all comes under the banner of communication though. So that is, as I said, the expertise that I sell. Clearly advertising and marketing, I can tell lots about storytelling, events, visual content, media, social media, all of that. Also with employee engagement, so whether or not we're working better together, collaboration, writing in-house for an intranet is an interesting thing about how to communicate to your own employees and what sort of things they need to hear, how frequently, talking about internal communications. Social media events, obviously. One that I do get to talk about a bit is gender bias and diversity. So gender bias is when we don't even realise that we're being a bit sexist, and coming from the world of advertising, when I started was in the 90s, and that was still, in fact, one of my very first jobs where I was a production assistant, I went to a meeting, and my only job in this entire meeting was to pipe up at the end and tell them when the date of the artwork was due. That was my entire job. That's all I had to do. So I was sitting there with my boss talking about all the important things that were going on. Then it came to my turn and I said, so the artwork's due at blah, 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 blah. And guy just looks at me and goes, you just sit there and look good. And I just thought, can you imagine that happening today? And I was 20 years old. Like I was straight out of uni. In fact, I was still studying at uni when I got that job. But I just thought, and that was complete. I was the only girl in the room. No one batted an eyelid, and we went on with our lives. Yeah. But but those sorts of things. And funnily enough, one of the things I started doing as I got older and more senior in advertising was there's nothing that pisses me off more, pardon my language, than when you leave a meeting room and the men leave it to the women to clear the glassware and coffee cups and whatever else. Like men who are more junior than the senior women in the room. And one of the things that I started to do now, whether or not this is swinging too far the other way, who knows, but I started calling the guys toots. So if they started to walk out, I'd be like, hey, Toots, are you going to help us clear up or what? And it was just one of those things whereby I honestly don't think they realised they were doing it. These aren't bad men. Like, it's just one of those things where it's like, that's not my thing. It's like, hang on. Yeah, it is. So just calling it out and kind of showing that these little things, and it can be done with humour. It doesn't have to be a kind of feminist ranting manifesto. It's just something that can be done. So yeah, talk about that. But also, the living through the change era now that we're in now with Me Too. So this idea the world really has changed and what appropriate's changed. And I think that some men are actually really nervous about interacting with women in the workplace, and I feel that that's a really interesting area to explore.
It's gone right that way, hasn't it?
Swung,
It needs to come.
Yeah, exactly. There's balance needs to happen. So yeah, completely. One of the other things, this is purely based mainly on my personal experience, but also through a bit of media training stuff, is about managing negative feedback online. But I certainly got a lot of bullshit coming through Twitter whenever I'm on TV. People bang on about how deep my voice is, whether I'm a man in drag, like some really kind of brutal stuff that comes out. And it's how do you deal with all of this sort of stuff? Well, Todd Sampson actually had his Twitter turned off. He doesn't have any social media where he can see any negative feedback. And so that was his way of dealing with it. But I think there's some interesting things. Like when you get burnt by this stuff, and I feel sorry for a lot of kind of reality TV stars who have no idea what they're getting themselves in for. It's like, oh, that'll be bad. Anyway. Also, generation communication. So one of my favourite presentations is marketing to boomers, and how it fascinates me how some younger people in advertising say, well, our target market's 50 plus, and they start putting geriatric people in the ads. It's like, whoa, no, that's not where we're at. No. Take it down a notch. But there's some really interesting examples of great advertising now going up to people and not treating them like they're old. And that is exactly the point around it. You're not old 50, that's absolutely crazy. So just looking at the generations, how we can do that. And then finally, I'm also an entrepreneur, so I know how to behave like an entrepreneur. And big brands have actually really been struggling because they need to behave like small brands now. They need to be far more agile. Nestle's head of production globally actually came out and said this in a meeting in Switzerland. He basically said our mass production facilities are the biggest problem to our growth and profit now than anything. So what used to be the fact that we could knock out 200,000 tons of cereal on a go, that's now a problem for us because people want smaller bespoke things. So it is, when you look at the difference of how manufacturing and consumer demand is changing, it's really interesting. So yeah, also talking about side hustle and being a slashy, which is an actor slash model or equivalent, which is, so that was from Zoolander. But having a slashy. So whether you're, you might work full time as a media assistant, but also be a photographer. So, it's pairing two things where you actually have more than one area of expertise. And then the digital democracy. So it is fair game for everyone. So it's good.
Can I just ask, is that recently there's been ads for Bulla Murray Street ice cream? Is that going into that, doing smaller bespoke
Very much.
stuff?
Absolutely. Right. And you'll find that a lot of the big companies are also trying to do acquisition of smaller brands so that they can have ownership of that where the manufacturing's already sorted, because it is one of those things, and I keep referring to Nestle because obviously there's a relationship there with Nespresso. But if they can't guarantee that they're going to produce 180,000 tons or whatever a week, then they can't run it on their lines. So they need to have little companies who are able to produce things at a much smaller scale in order to be able to test and learn and do things in a different way. I mean, and then you have online shopping, and the way that people buy products is completely changing too. And yeah, it's a fascinating exercise of how.
And my daughter will only buy sustainability, organic, biodegradable. There's 20 things. We have vegan.
Well, I think the beer companies have woken up to brand because they're all buying these little boutique brands, and you think, oh, it's little, Matilda Bay Brewing Company, but behind the scenes there's a big distribution network, and they're pumping out this niche brandy product. And
they know that. So there's over 400 boutique beer brands now in Australia, and some of the big ones, you think, oh, that's little, and they're designed to look that way. Absolutely, because people want to buy small and local and not see
support
small business.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Wow.
So this is just, if in case you, as I said, this is something that you can forward on, but this is just some of the previous speaking stuff I've done. I've done more than this. This is just kind of some of the things that came out, but lots of different stuff. So any support that you need in certainly any of these areas I can do, but as I said, communications is something that is essential to every industry, and it's something that everyone will benefit from improving. So, yeah.
Look, Carolyn, many of the consultants like myself have a number of clients in finance, and obviously finance has gone through this little bit of a roller coaster in the last few years, from high on the hog to, you know, trust being smashed pieces and that kind of coming out of it. So it's interesting to see that that's your first area there, and looking through what you present, it's more than branding, it's creativity. What have you found over the last, 6 to 12 months in how those the staff, the consultants that work for the big finance guys are kind of like reconciling the fact that the big brand did the wrong thing, but it's not them, and how do they go forward and communicate to their client base?
And it's interesting because obviously a lot of these guys as well are like independent brokers who are working under a big brand, and then they have to go out. And this is where it comes down to your relationships and being able to build your brand underneath the heading of what you've come under. And at the end of the day, the Australian public is pretty forgiving of big financial organisations. Like AMP was in the poop a while ago, and that's actually part of the reason why I did the premium branding thing for them, was because they need to look for some of their financial brokers, how that was going to improve. So it is about looking at your role in the bigger business and how you can actually start promoting yourself to your clientele and your base, because at the end of the day, these big financial organisations aren't just giving them all to you. And it's actually funny, my sister works for Deutsche. She's a VP over there, and apparently there's a new book coming out which is talking about, because Trump is financed essentially through Deutsche, about how the billions of dollars he owes them through the US bank. And they got absolutely, have you seen, sorry, I'm delving off track, but have you seen a movie, a movie about the 2008 financial crash? And it was about, so it was a guy from Deutsche Bank.
Big Short.
Yeah, The Big Short, exactly. It's an excellent movie.
So
So kind of watching their bank and what that's done, there's been some really interesting things with it. But for the most part, one of the reasons that people stay with their banks and their financial services is they're too lazy to leave.
Yeah.
So it's actually
it's too damn hard.
Yeah, exactly. So it is one of those things that acquisition is a really interesting and challenging point around where people need to be targeting their audiences. And one of the things you need to look at as well is our population growth is coming through migration. So what are you doing to actually bring in people who need to open new accounts, who actually aren't switching, but are genuinely starting afresh? What are you doing to assist with that? Because 80% of our migrants are highly skilled. They're going to be earning money. They want money to spend and money to invest.
Yeah.
I think we do have questions, but if I hit the screen.
I'm done. So just going to say that's my final slide. Thank you very much. My website and my new show reel will be up next month. So I'm just working with a videographer at my next speaking gig in a couple of weeks to get some very new content, so that I'm not lying about how I look, essentially. They know what they're getting. We're going to add that in.
So 1990s footage is not
so me in my school uniform won't be on it, doing the debate team. No, it'll be clips from the TV stuff that I've done, a few different speaking things. So I do have some other speaking stuff that will come through. And my website will be up and running specifically for carolynmiller.com.au.
Perfect. Also, no questions, just lots of comments.
Good.
Lots of comments, great topics. The innovation and creativity, we always get asked for presenters on that. I think you've got a really refreshing,
Yeah, no, that's really great you've got that, because I think until you've sort of come along now, you just think of branding and advertising, but now I think we've seen that there's a much wider gamut of topics that you can cover in so well and such great depth, and then link them all together. So I think clients, I know my clients just really love that sort of stuff, and hopefully everybody else will find the same too. So,
and you said that you were family practice, was it? You volunteered for
family planning.
Family planning. Yes, so you can cover
women's health, women's issues, because we did domestic violence screening,
domestic violence at the moment,
sort of
because of that horrible thing that's happened in Queensland.
That's
awful. That is horrendous.
So domestic violence.
Women's issues, and also culturally and linguistically diverse populations and the challenges that they face as well. However, I wouldn't put myself forward as that being a white girl, but just in case, because it's about minority populations and how you can actually really work to improve their lot and improve their health.
Okay, so does anybody have any last minute questions before we sign out?
Come on, Eva, you must have a question.
No, Eva, you've gone very quiet.
So I realise I've gone over time.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
They're such interesting content.
Yes, it is really
little
interesting.
light bulbs.
Yeah.
No.
What else did I write
Do
down?
you run workshops?
Oh, yes.
Absolutely. And so that was a core part of me being a planning director in advertising. So that is something very, very comfortable with. I'm also very comfortable with big audiences. So very happy to be on the stage in that sense. Yep, all good.
Yep, no. Yes, I asked that question about the workshops, about especially to do with the creativity and innovation. Yeah, okay.
Brilliant.
Awesome that you can also do emceeing and facilitation, so that's fantastic. And yep, okay, we're done.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Do I just say goodbye?
Let's just say good ta-ta.
Oh.
You all over together?
My new best friend. Well, guys, look, I hope you absolutely enjoyed that. I thought it was a fantastic delight. It was a great look into exactly what Carolyn can offer to us. I'm sure we'll all get out there and absolutely pitch it, and I'm sure our clients are just going to love it to death. So
Agree.
thanks
Agree.
for tuning in.
She's
and
gorgeous
well
as
done.
well.
Oh,
So-
thank you. Thanks
I
for
like to say that.
Oh, thank you. And thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate it. So I know it's not easy, so I really love the time.
No,
Thank you.
it's really
Thank
good
you.
that it all just, everything worked serendipitous. That you were down here and
Yeah,
yep, so that's
all good.
awesome. So we just video that, but we don't, it's just for the intranet, just for the, if anyone didn't see it.
Sure.
And if they want to just go over it, which might be nice to send out with